All right, welcome back. Today we are going to continue with our reading of The Red Lion, and we're entering into the third book within the book. It is called The Phoenix Soars, and it starts with a quote from the Egyptian Book of the Dead and a fragment attributed to Hermes, Mercurius Trismegistus. And then we'll start chapter 26, the sign of Aquarius. And maybe we'll go into chapter 27, the Temple of the Moon, to get started here. The opening of this third book, the opening chapters are kind of short here. So, the Phoenix soars. Here's a quote from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. "Blind soul, arm thyself with the torch of the mysteries, and thou canst find, even in the night of the earth, that shining other body, thy divine soul. Follow this heavenly guide. Let it be thy genius, for it holds the key of thy past and future embodiments." That is an appeal to initiates from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And then the fragment attributed to Hermes. "Turn your attention within and glance into the infinity of time and space. The song of the stars, the speech of numbers, and the harmony of the spheres all have their origins there. Every sun is a thought of God, and every planet the thought's expression. Ascend and descend, O souls, the path of the 7 planets, and in the 7 skies of these 7 planets shall ye recognize the divine thoughts. What do the stars sing? What do numbers talk about? What do the spheres reveal? O ye lost or redeemed souls, these stars, numbers, and spheres are revealing your fate." So the first chapter in this third book is called The Sign of Aquarius. And he is incarnating again. Here we go. "The woman whose body could accept my soul with its new gold was gentle and even-tempered, just like a true alchemist furnace. I was born on the grey dawn on February 27th, 1760, in a place permeated with the mystic radiation of the secret sciences. My father, Cornelius von Grotte, was court musician and confidant to the Landgraf Karl, Prince of Hesse-Kassel, and the two were members of the same mystic order. My father was a very skillful painter and writer, but his glowing artistry was directed to only one end: the accomplishment of the great work that becomes steadily more obscure to the outer world as it nears completion. His works were not for this world. They are guarded in the secret library of the order, and only those who understand the 3 levels of symbolism can see them. The castle of Grotte stood in the middle of the dense murmuring forest of hawks, and the windows of its square towers overlooked the river Fulda. The north windows overlooked the icy mountains of Karlsruhe Park and the silhouette of the Orangerie Castle and its marble pools. Within the castle was the silence of meditation, which made it seem austere as a monastery. Even our few guests instinctively walked on tiptoe so as not to disturb the gentle euphoric spell. Not even the hushed conversations in the evenings or the massive tones of the great organ disturbed it. They merely seemed to add art to the serenity. My mother was a tall Gothic woman with improbably slender fingers, a transparent face, and a high noble forehead. She was the most taciturn woman I met in my whole life journey, but hers was the silence of accommodation, peaceful and expressive. People who talked to her never felt she was indifferent or reserved. Her smiling eyes and compassionate silence prompted even the timid and introverted to communicate. Hers was a power of silence. She was well educated and unusually intelligent, and she quietly graduated through the grades of the order with my father. She was always first to read and criticize his writings, and her marginal notes show her intuition. Her intense energy was always channeled into some important work, and my father, who, like most artistic, rhapsodic geniuses, was frequently discouraged, received tremendous help from her emotional balance. Words cannot express what she came to mean to me. She was well prepared for my coming. This time my parents knew who was to be born to them. They knew more about me than I knew myself, for my third eye had been reopened only by the elixir I had acquired by murder. The order had kept track of my path for a long time, a few millennia, and expected me to be born among them in the sign of Aquarius. I had neither to hide nor to tell anything. During my infancy, my new body couldn't transmit my spirit completely, and my parents communicated with me accordingly. But by the time I was 10 or 11, they treated me like any other junior in the order, as an uninitiated adult. They knew my goal and knew that it was their task to lead me toward it. Both they and their friends had expected me, and they loved me and awaited my birth with more joy than ordinary parents, for they knew what I had done and the depths of hell from which I had climbed. The prodigal son was returning to them, tattered and wounded, but past his crisis. A person who has been an initiate and falls away loses the ancient memory. He has some obscure presentiment of this great loss. It burns in him as he wanders the labyrinths, a consuming sense of loss that stays unsated for thousands of years. He strives to reach the occult light again, though he is dazed and blinded like a moth. He will burn and fall only to try again in a new body, obeying the mystical tenet, "Burn thy body with the fire of thy thoughts." The body will always burn during this futile experiment, but it will burn with astral desires, which are strengthened and awakened by the experience. Yet this flaming seed only produces a mortal body. It was beside Corinna's disintegrating body that the transcendental light of thought flared within me. For Corinna had encompassed and consumed all of my astral restlessness and egotistical lewd attraction to beauty of form. She sucked them all into her flesh and blood and enchained them on the chain of her forms. When the magic of her body was shattered, all my desire for the spectral world of astral swamps went with it. My impassioned sidereal second body was burned by the fire of thought, and my third one appeared, numb, dormant, ignorant, and inexperienced, a junior ready for awakening, realization, and illumination. I didn't participate in the order's gatherings while my body and brain were developing. Instead, my parents introduced me to mental exercises. They forced me to do organized work regardless of how difficult I found it. During certain hours of the day, with no exceptions, I had to perform various assigned tasks: writing, translating difficult texts from French to German, or most arduous, I had to memorize portions of books whose unknown Oriental language had been notated in Latin characters. Later I studied Hebrew, Egyptian, Urdu, Sanskrit, Tibetan, and Chinese, and learned all their strange characters. These tasks strengthened my restless and quickly distracted mind and compelled me to concentrate and persist diligently even when the task itself was unrewarding. Boring though they seemed, they were still the only way to learn, and I was richly rewarded for these dry hours by the hours when my parents worked to waken my mystical senses and train the delicate feelers of intuition which seek out the truths of etheric akasha beyond thought, time, and space. My bedtime stories were occult music and poetry, which filled me with a thrilling moonlight of mysteries and taught me the meaning of symbols. Let's go on to chapter 27, The Temple of the Moon. For many peaceful years, the same silvery night seemed to fall on my father's study as though it had stopped in time. The same highlights shone on the gigantic copper-colored organ pipes, and the triple rows of keys responded in the same way to my father's agile fingers. This huge instrument was the channel through which I experienced the exalted beauty of transcendental poetry. Just as Orpheus, that most blessed and misunderstood interpreter of the divine art, was able to recreate the Eleusinian nights. My father always established the atmosphere for his story with the strange sonorous colors of the organ. He would play bewitching mystical chords that flowed together without resolution. These evoked wonderful, luminous colors to the seeing eye and told a tale in living symbols that needed only to be translated into words. And the first story he told me was this. Once long ago there lived in the city of where the people wore the gentle moon mask of the night-born, a princess named Belshalti-Nanar, the daughter of King Nabuniad. Now all this took place during the last days of Abraham's city of after the death of the great Nebuchadnezzar. The eyes of the princess shone like the pure lines of the moon temple, and their depths were like the shadows of moonlit nights. Though Belshalti-Nanar was beautiful, she was a stranger to all mankind. Her female companions shunned her, for they sensed that she was much older than they, and the men avoided her, for they saw behind her purity not the hungry fire they expected, but the ashes of horrible fires long dead. Thus, Belshalti-Nanar became a priestess of the temple of the moon god and Ningal, the moon goddess, a temple that lay beside the stepped ziggurat and was lit by the bright moon disk. Belshalti-Nanar knew and loved the traditions of the ancients and searched tirelessly for knowledge concerning the glorious sacred past of the city of Like her father Nabuniad, she read the secret messages of the ancients upon their statues and stone tablets. She had a contemplative and questing mind and a bold spirit, for she did not shrink to take her questions to Nanar the moon god and his radiant mate Ningal. She besieged them continually with questions, for she wished not merely to believe, but to understand. The 9 old priests would smile wisely as they watched her tall, slender figure follow the moon over the holy road and turn into the corridor of the 9 columns. Then they would retire silently to the lesser sanctuary and light the 4 oil lamps around the throne of Ningal, the veiled goddess. Belshalti-Nanar would ascend the 4 sets of 7 steps and stand upon the square tower of the stargazers in the face of the full moon. And lo, her blue garment shone in the light that threw deep shadows behind her. Then would she address the disk of light. Behold, I am here. Thou didst call, and I have answered thee. My face shines with thy radiance, even as thine cloth shine with the brilliance of the sun. But lo, there is deep shadow behind me and thee, a shadow that cloudeth both heaven and earth. The very communion between us casteth a shadow upon heaven and earth. For this cause I, who am slave to thy chain of light, serve thee weeping, for I can in no wise understand either thy nature or mine own. Thus spake Belshalti-Nanar unto the full moon for 7 years, and for 7 years the moon answered not. It spake only with the silent tongue of the oceans, the blood and the humours. But Belshalti-Nanar did not falter, nor was she discouraged in her quest. Nor did she seek wisdom of the 9 old priests who lit the 4 lamps around the throne of Ningal in the lesser sanctuary. She knew that their knowledge could sustain and rejuvenate only those who drew from the secret fountain which they did visit in secret. And in the 7th month of the 7th year, the full moon spoke to Belshalti-Nanar. Those who persist in asking have ever received an answer, but mortals seldom wait until their question is fully formed and condensed into an arrow that can break the seal of silence. Because thou hast waited, even so thou shalt receive an answer. Hear ye it, and lock it within thee, and allow no one who is unworthy to learn the words thereof. Verily, there is no limit to him who is boundless, infinite, perfect, and eternal. Thus everything that existeth, truth, infinity, and even eternity itself, hath also its opposite. If this were not so, he would not be truly free. Hence the tree of knowledge, which is even a great analogy, could have stood in front of him who was free without harm, for it is the work of the everlasting emanated being. The evil and deadly, attractive and beautiful thing could have stood before him to awaken the desires of the flesh against which the everlasting warned, but did not make impossible. Therefore no mortal can give unto the inexperienced child his life experience, either in this world or the world above. For lo, the pattern must be repeated continuously, even as the ripples when a stone is thrown into the water. For the mortal must needs experience the evil form, the world of death, in order that he might know of a certainty that he is the right way, and that redemption proceedeth only from him. The eternal and Ningal, his reverse potential, are the divine duality. For the veiled goddess already ruled the lesser sanctuary in the sunken ancient homeland. She who hath been and will be worshipped and venerated by the nations of the earth, even she is the ruler of all the blessed and sinful women of the earth. She ruleth also over me, her humble servant, pronouncing my secret name Shin, and is even the mediator who ruleth over the planets, stars, and the very universe. Her veil is the Milky Way and the vast covering of the stars. She it was who was the goddess of your forefathers, the resplendent Ishtar of their sunken ancient homeland, the Atlantean Isis. And behold, desire slumbered in Ningal, the temptress, and the desire of procreation flared within her. The everlasting was the begetter, and Ningal, the great mother, from whose womb the third, the mortal being, came forth, burdened with Ningal's mortal desire, and uplifted by that recognition of the everlasting that conquereth death. It was his word that spoke Ningal into being, but he himself is unmanifested. So Ningal's progeny, the mortal being, began his journey. And lo, the great law also began, as it is below, so it is above. The mortal being, like the great mother and father, was split in twain by desire and by the curiosity for the separate way. And this sundering born of desire and curiosity gave birth to the twin forces of attraction and repulsion, and from these were born a third, and the third followed the example of its parents. Thus an infinite number of mortal beings came forth from the womb of Ningal, and each was a repetition, a widening circle of the wondrous God drama above. And the everlasting consented unto this, for the cure for desire is gratification, and the cure for evil is suffering. Where desire slumbereth, slumbereth danger also, danger that is averted only by the total fulfillment of the ripples of the omniverse. Though he is unmanifested, yet is he a part of every being, an invisible substance that cannot be destroyed. For the everlasting needs no experience. He is unchanging and is Lord over death. Behold, Ningal desired, she burned with the pleasure of conception. She brought forth her progeny in sweat, exulting in the illusion dance of time. She tried without ceasing to form eternal beauty from the temporal matter, but her labor was in vain, like one who maketh images in the snow. Ningal indeed experienced the pleasures of time, and, behold, she found them to be nothing, a bubble in the wind. She suffered and perished often in the drama of existence, always striving to return unto him who is patient, silent, omniscient, and eternal. To this end she endured the fiery furnace of pain to make complete her surrender. But this cannot be accomplished until the three become two and the two become one. And the mortal being returneth continually unto Ningal, and Ningal doth return continually unto him. Since the inner essence of every being is the omniscient and patient divine ego, in each and every being there liveth not only the figure of coming into existence, but also the desire of Ningal, born of her bitter disappointment and knowledge, to return unto her divine partner. This is the meditation, knowledge, and disillusionment of the more mature Ningal as she ascends toward the unique, unmanifested, and everlasting. Ningal's cry of desire and wail of repentance echo through the omniverse even unto this day. The cry of lust descendeth into the lower paths of existence. In every bride the veiled Ningal hasteneth with lustful excitement into dangerous desires and the elusive joy of creation. In every priestess Ningal taketh the vow of chastity and resisteth those desires and passions that bring suffering. Every womb holdeth Ningal's new hope, her new invention. So also in every tomb lieth Ningal's bitter failure, from which is born repentance and recognition. For lo, a thing must needs die and decay ere it shall rise. If Ningal would rise unto him forever, first she and then the beings to whom she gave birth must know death and decay. As it is above, even so is it below. Thus spake the full moon to Bel-Shaltin-Anar. Bel-Shaltin-Anar stood erect in the square tower of the stargazers and faced the disk of the moon that began sinking below the sand dunes. She breathed deeply as the pale, mysterious face of Shin disappeared, dragging her long, milky veil behind her to make way for the dawn. But Bel-Shaltin-Anar did not await the sun, that lamp of red joys. She returned down the 4 sets of 7 steps and hurried along the corridor of the 9 columns, with the light of the sun reaching longingly after her. But the princess would not turn away after it. Instead, she walked swiftly past the 9 old priests who stood in ceremonial order before the door of the lesser sanctuary. As she approached, they drew open the curtains unto her. So Bel-Shaltin-Anar entered into the sanctuary and approached the base of the throne where the 4 oil lamps enveloped the veiled goddess in shimmering light. She knelt before the throne making obeisance, then sprinkled incense into the vessel prepared for it and lit it from one of the oil lamps. This done, she began to gaze intently through the blue smoke at the veiled face of the goddess. And lo, the silence of ecstasy reigned within the sanctuary, and only the vigilant priests numbered the days and the hours thereof. And lo, the veils began to drop from Ningal's figure quietly and without the seeming of motion. On the 4th day, after the 4th test, Bel-Shaltin-Anar discerned the soft contours of her knees, waist, and arms. Upon the 5th day she saw her hands, which held the key of life. And upon the 6th day the last veil fell, and she beheld the face of the goddess. And behold, it was as though she looked into a mirror. Then did Bel-Shaltin-Anar understand the illusion of all things, even that delusion condensed into matter divides that which is one. She understood the tragedy of living beings and her own tragedy within it. Redemption and liberation were also made known unto her in this moment, but lo, they were afar off, at the very end of the days of the earth, and she was consumed with bitterness and dejection after all her fastings and sacrifices. She spake unto the goddess, O thou silent and disappointed mother, thou wretched mother of the world, alas, we must remain in this dark world until the last desire hath been burned from the cosmos, until the pharos of the last emotion dieth out and the last question of mankind becometh ashes, until the bubble of the last death bursts upon the eternal river. Alack, we must wait and dance the dance of the great spiral, the endless ring dance piped by the flutes of our own bones. And Bel-Shaltin-Anar wept bitter tears as she gazed upon the uncovered visage of the goddess on which her tears were mirrored. Then a 7th time she filled the lamps at the 4 corners of the throne and threw fresh incense into the censer. And lo, after the endless night, the 7th day dawned, and the tears of the goddess were dry. She smiled as a bride who journeyeth unto the bridal chamber, and behold, the door behind her, even the door of the greater sanctuary, was opened. And the eldest of priests awaited her upon the threshold, his robes embroidered with a pale green and gold sign that signifieth Aquarius. He stretcheth out his hand unto her, and she arose and followed him. And Bel-shalti-nannar smiled with a hopeful smile of the goddess as she entered unto the greater sanctuary. That is the end of chapter 27, but it is not the end of the story of Bel-shalti-nannar, which goes on for the next 2 chapters, but they will come later. Thank you.